All right, welcome to Legacies, everyone. Legacies is powered by AVEO, leaders in sustainable vape hardware. We're joined this week by Creed Taylor, Chief of Extraction for Leaf Infusions. Creed, how you doing, man?
Spectacular as always, man. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Listen, dude, you are a legacy operator to the root because, and I usually know when I'm like doing research on guests, I'm like, okay, there's not a lot. There's not
I
a
don't I,
lot.
I don't have a LinkedIn profile. I'm not out here on that corporate wave. I'm from my own world for
Oh,
sure.
dude, I am so excited to have you on because this is a world like when it comes to extraction, I don't know anything. I feel like an idiot, especially when I have someone like you on. But congrats on the new gig with Leaf Infusions. We
Thanks,
know
man.
that your accolades that span into the legacy era, pre-legalization. We're going to talk a little bit about that because I always like to understand the background and the mindset of the individual. That's like, yeah, I'm going to go to the regulated industry. It's going to be a much smoother path, which it is not by any means. So
Never.
no, I appreciate you. I'm looking very forward to learning as much as I can about extractions and what the differentiators are. I think is the biggest thing because, man, when you start talking, rosin versus resin versus disti versus, hydrocarbon, like I can say the words, but I don't know what most of it means. But
Of
anyways,
course.
let's back up. Let's first understand your background and, what really lands you in the role having a wicked title like Chief of Extraction.
Yeah, man. Definitely a long road, lengthy path, paved with pitfalls and valleys, and lots of interesting experiences. All of which shaped who I am today and got me to the point that I'm at in the industry. But honestly, if we're taking it all the way back, I gotta credit my initial interest in extraction to a fun little website that many people may know from the late 90s, early 2000s called Arrowid. And
Arrowhead. Okay.
Arrowid was one of the first kind of go-to resources for anyone looking to create their own psychedelics or extract and
Wow.
refine illicit substances. There was tons of, step-by-step manuals that were peer-reviewed and edited by tons of people within this internet community. And
Are we
I was
talking like early forum type days? Like just as
early, yeah,
wow.
exactly. Forum
Awesome.
type days, but a little more open access
Okay.
and spanning a wide variety of topics, not just consumable, mind altering substances,
Right,
but all
right.
sorts of weird anarchistic things like explosives and smoke bombs and Molotov cocktails and anything that would disturb a government,
Yeah, I was gonna say
I
anything the
guess.
government's offside with.
Exactly, exactly. But no, I've been around cannabis my entire life. My parents were avid consumers. I'm the son of a proud Jamaican and ex hippie era flower child. So I grew up around cannabis my whole life. Some of my earliest exposures, were 9, 10, 11. Being around it, seeing it. My parents were pretty tied in with the cannabis culture folk over
Mhm.
here in BC, where they were pretty much pioneers of the culture in the community at the time. And I think my parents used to pick up their weed off Michelle Rainey, RIP, who her
Okay.
along with
Yeah.
Jeff Tech developed, legacy strains that, are still to this day iconic, like Afghani Bull Rider and things
Wow.
like that.
Wow.
So my parents were already tapped in with the fire. And as a young kid, I'd be sneaking into their bathroom and going through their drawers to try and find their stash. And usually it was loud enough for me to find with my nose.
Yeah.
But they were attending cannabis cups and early cannabis industry events like that. Obviously way before legalization. But just hyper exposure to cannabis just kind of led me to the path of appreciation, and never really had a stigma in my household. So once I started consuming at a pretty early age, roughly 12 years old, I kind of just went just full tilt into the game.
Well, I mean,
And
for you, you would have had like that's like having the keys to to a Ferrari and expecting to drive like a Cavalier or something. But let me ask you because I always ask this like when you have exposure from parents or an upbringing that is not stigmatizing the plant and not stigmatizing the flower, your view on on the world, especially within Canada, and the regulation of it and hypocritical side of it and the nature, that must be very difficult to deal with. Like, what did you see as you were growing up when it came to that? Was it like, what the fuck? Why are they so against cannabis? Like, or were you taught that?
No, yeah, I mean, it definitely something that was kind of confusing to me, especially with like, my presence around the pot block, it was called, in Vancouver here, where they had, Blunt Brothers and Amsterdam Cafe and cannabis culture and all those vapor
Mhm.
lounges. And to me, it was just such a normalized thing,
Right.
and I never looked at it differently. To me, smoking a cigarette almost seemed more
Yeah.
extreme than smoking a joint. Um, so yeah, just pure desensitization. And then, you know, you have friends and peer groups and you're kind of already smoking and exposed to it. And they're looking at you like, whoa, like what? Like this kid just pulled out a joint and he's
He's a
13 years
baddie.
old, like,
He's
and,
gonna get us
you
in
know,
trouble.
yeah, my friends coming home to their parents smelling like weed and they're
Oh,
having their
man, yeah.
parents be like, you can never hang out with Creed again, like things like that. So yeah, it was definitely, I always thought it was kind of weird. I know my parents did a good job to kind of like protect my friend group and not, you know, over normalize the consumption so that,
Sure.
I could still have regular friends
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But no, they did a good job, and yeah, it's definitely a culture shock, especially when you start getting into high school,
Yeah.
and then you're already selling eights and 20 bags to your friends and all this stuff, and you can't figure out why it's so demonized. But I mean, I think if anything, I recognized its value as a commodity very
Mm,
early as
okay.
well, and it just seemed like a great opportunity to be able to capitalize financially
Sure, of
while
course.
also spreading, the ideology of consumption, to people that were so scared or of it or demonized it or
Mhm,
looked upon it, negatively. I think I did a really good job as I grew up of kind of like normalizing the consumption and showing that you can still be, somewhat of an intellectual or a highly productive individual while still consuming constantly. So
mhm.
that was, yeah, one of the earliest things for me was just realizing that if this is something I could take advantage of it in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Um,
So where
yeah,
did that passion come from for, so you're talking, mid, late 90s, stumbling across, like, where did the passion for extraction come from? Because, I mean, you probably weren't, other than, like, maybe hash and stuff like that, like, in those days, it wouldn't have been huge when it came to extractions.
yeah, it was actually incredibly rare to have any sort of like solvent extracted oil. It was all water hash and dry sift and some other new techs like static tech and things were coming in to refine gland heads and
Mhm,
make, the purest hash possible. And I was always looking for something stronger, well, not necessarily stronger, but also something that really showcases the individuality of the plants. And I think, when you're just young in your teens and you're just smoking joints in this, it's like weed is weed is weed.
weed
And
is
then,
weed, yeah,
and then
exactly.
every now and then you come across a bag that you're just like, wait a minute, like
Yeah.
this is not like normal.
And then
Like
good luck
this,
getting it again, right? Because they're either
yeah,
sold
it's
out, they didn't know what it was, yeah.
yeah, and you finally, you get that one bag that isn't boof, and as a teenager still, like, I have to go pick up an ounce or 2 ounces from somebody that's way older than me, and they're always looking to take advantage of the
Oh,
young
yeah,
guys, so
sure.
it's like you're still spending
Here's some ditch
$200 an
weed,
ounce
yeah.
for some, yeah, some
Yeah.
absolute garbage until someone finally puts you on, and then, when I started noticing, like, wow, like, there's such a massive variety in cultivars, and they have such, unique flavors and terps and all this stuff, and then, you get that bag, you get a hash or something like that, and you see, okay, when hash is extremely pure, it melts into a liquid practically. You have your full melt, and you have to come up with new methods to consume it, and everything kind of just goes hand in hand. The awakening to like the extract kind of market, and after. Yeah, going through really high quality hashes and things like that, you start hearing people talk about other methods and like, oh, did you know you could take 99% iso alcohol and do a quick wash of your hash and then make like a quick wash isotech hash oil. And then of course it's so crude. You don't really have the purging techniques down. You end up going to smoke it and it lights on fire and shit like that. And then
Yeah, yeah.
I think I was just like, okay, like I kind of know I want to lean towards the extracts and hashes and things like that, but I needed more info, and everybody was tight-lipped. At that time,
Yeah.
if you really wanted to learn how to make one of these consumable extracts, you had to pay somebody,
Okay.
and you had to pay an extravagant amounts of money. I
Well, you'd
was
be
hearing.
cutting into their livelihood at the end of the day.
Yeah, and most of the people that were doing this on a commercial scale were, organized crime
Yeah,
involved,
yeah, for
or
sure.
had ulterior motives, or were extracting the plant in order to sell both the flour after and the oil, and kind of double down on their profit and things like that. But the motivations were a little bit more nefarious. But I, considered myself a connoisseur at quite an early age, and so with no one willing to kind of volunteer that information without $50,000 cash to teach you, you turn to the internet, and
Right.
the internet, in the early 2000s was becoming a whole new level of resource for this information, and a lot of it wasn't being regulated or censored. So if you just typed in, cannabis hash oil extraction, Google would just prompt you with a bunch of, pages that had information about this. And after kind of sifting through the bullshit, I found Arrowhead, and Arrowhead uh gave very detailed step-by-step instructions on, how to prepare the cannabis, how to pack it, what kind of tube you needed, where to get the butane, how to filter it, how to purge it, things like that. So, immediately, also me not understanding the dangers of these things, just was on my, in the living room on my family Hewlett Packard,
Yeah.
like big box computer, and just being like, like print all the print all the information out, taking it up to my room, and just like trying to like open blast oil like in my bedroom and stuff like that, with all sorts of, improvised tools
Well,
that
that's what I
obviously
really
were.
wanted to know what your first setup was, what it looked like.
Oh
I
my
mean, for
god, I'm
me, when I
so
I think the first was like BTO and, you've tried some decent hash oil or honey oil, but it just failed miserably on my end.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, and I'm embarrassed to even volunteer this information, but all of my first, extraction tubes were made from the most clandestine of parts. I think the very first thing I ever tried to extract, and it's, I'm a kid. It's not like I have pounds and pounds of weed to
Yeah, yeah,
extract.
yeah.
I'm trying to make oil out of like a 20 bag or like an eighth, like to
Right.
get that like point 0.5 of oil, and like smoke it in a couple hits, and then it's gone, But to me, it was worth it. But I think the very first thing I used to make a spray tube was a Kinder Surprise egg.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Like,
trust me, I don't even wanna be, like, volunteering this information, but I feel like we're just gonna put it all out on the
we're
table
just
here,
like, but how does that work? Oh my god,
I
a
think
Kinder Egg.
you just, you get the toy inside that little egg
Yeah.
inside that. I popped it open, dumped the tools out, and then poked a bunch of small holes in one end, and then inserted, like, a butane can adapter into the
Yeah,
top end, and then ground up, like, 3 grams of weed and stuffed it inside there, and just blasted it, and,
just blasted it. Oh
I
my
mean, it
god.
worked. I mean,
Yeah.
I highly doubt that a Kinder Surprise egg is made out of a
Yeah.
material that can withstand these solvents, so I'm sure I was, poisoning myself practically. But I think the second thing I used was a mini M&M's tube. Like,
Okay.
I don't know why I don't know why I was choosing chocolate and candy
Yeah,
products,
just
but
laying
maybe
around. Hey,
because
it's almost Easter. Why
yeah,
not, right?
well, I think maybe because of my age, these were
Yeah,
things
for
that
sure.
were accessible
You're
to
not
me,
exactly
and
sitting
around, like,
on adaptive beakers and all these things, right?
yeah, and, borosilicate tubes and all this
Yeah.
stuff, and, I'm not even really filtering it. I'm just hoping that the holes I've poked are small enough to keep the
Yeah.
weed out and let the oil through. And I was just doing this in my bedroom on a super small scale, and then just like dipping my Pyrex dish in hot water and trying to evaporate the butane. And
Well,
I'm
at least
sure
you
I
did
could have,
that.
yeah, I'm sure I could have blown myself up many times. But I
Yeah.
mean, hot water and, a little bit of butane, I'm sure that's still not the most
No.
effective method
No, you
of
still wanna do
purging.
that outside, not in your bedroom, but I mean,
Definitely,
listen,
definitely.
as you're laying this out, it's interesting because some people learn as adults, they go through the process, and a lot now will only ever learn in commercial type settings, right?
Yeah,
They're not using a Kinder Egg, they're not, Googling how to do this. Well, maybe some are,
yeah.
but I
No,
think that
they're coming in the game with a silver spoon, basically,
yes, yes, but I mean, that's based on your legacy and others' legacies of trial and error. We've tried that, we tried the Kinder eggs. They don't work so well. We went to M&M tubes, not so good either. Also, well ventilated spaces probably work well too, right?
Yeah, we were not concerned at that time period with safety whatsoever, or toxicity for that matter. But I mean, I guess the scale was small enough that it was, not
Yeah.
super, super dangerous, but I'm sure I could have blown the walls out of my
Oh,
family
probably.
house.
Yeah. So fast forward to where now you start to, commercialize it. And I don't mean commercialize it by the regulated sense. I mean, I'm making some product that's pretty decent. What did that look
Yeah.
like? And were you starting to move that product?
Yeah, well, I mean, the interesting part is that it wasn't the extractors at all that were solely responsible for the development of these processes. It was kind of amalgamation of the glass blowers at the time, kind of trying to find new ways to consume the oil, while
Oh.
also being like, look, like maybe there's a more effective way that we can create tools for the extractors so that they can make a better oil that we can consume using our new
Hmm.
devices that we've created.
Smart.
And I mean, originally, I think, maybe around 2005, 2006, people moved to like PVC tubes. And then it was like, you're going to the hardware store and you're getting hose clamps and some mesh and coffee filters, and you're making
Yeah.
these big PVC tube columns, which is still, disgusting when I talk about it now. But
But they still exist.
yeah, they still exist. I mean, people will do what they need to do to get what they need done,
Mhm.
people are always very resourceful. The large scale production was kind of introduced to me, unfortunately through organized crime. And, as I was a teenager in my senior year in high school, there was always these guys hanging around trying to get the younger kids to sell dope for them at high school and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And I think I just remember one of my plugs, I went over to his house to buy a half ounce or something like that. And he was just like, "Oh, like, have you ever heard of this stuff like called butter?" And I'm like, "Butter? Like what? Like edible butter? Like you put it on your toast or whatever?" And he's like, "No, no, no. You take a little chunk of it and you put it on your cigarette and then you smoke it. You put the cigarette in a bottle and then you do the like bottle tech." And it's like, just still the most crude methods of consumption. But the scale started once I saw that, and I was like, "Oh shit, like real like crumbly Kush butter that just smelt like gassy and had, a true to strain nose and stuff like that." I was like, "Okay, like there's something to this. Like I can see that it's moving in a direction that is viable."
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, in my senior year in high school, I just started working for these guys that were basically just like, "Look, like we'll put you in this garage, we'll give you the weed, here's the tools, you just make oil all day, and then you can keep whatever you want to smoke," and stuff like that. I'm not even concerned about getting paid. I'm like 15, 16 years old, just so excited to be around
Cooking
this
up
stuff.
butter.
Cooking up butters, whipping it for these guys. They're taking it from me, selling it for, cocaine kilo prices at that time,
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
it was so expensive. And I was just happy to get my little scrapings off the side and have, some oil for me and my friends to smoke. But, as I started engaging more with the cannabis community and going to cannabis culture and meeting the glass blowers and sharing the stuff I was making, people just started rubbing their heads together. And then I think one of my good friends, I'll shout him out, Thatcher Glass, a real OG on the BC kind of glass blowing scene, a protege of some of the legends like Surf Rat and Marble Slinger and these guys. Um, he was like, "Hey, like, why don't I make you something? Like, why don't we start making something better than these PVC tubes you're using? And I'll make you like a custom glass borosilicate tube with a flare on one end and a pinch on the other, so that you can, insert your butane can
Yeah.
nozzle on the end and then put whatever filter you want over the other side." And glass was a terrifying substance to be working with, considering it's all under pressure and getting
Right.
cold. But the efficiency of, the packing and loading and unloading and spraying just, increased tenfold. So it allowed us to really not only increase the quality and purity, but have much higher throughput.
Mm.
And over time, I watched these tubes grow from, little prospecting tubes that could fit maybe like 10 grams, 14 grams, to tubes that could fit a half pound or 1 pound in them. And
Wow.
then, yeah, we started realizing, okay, now that we're extracting on a much larger scale, maybe it is dangerous to be doing this in my parents' garage or, in my bedroom. So, we start moving outdoor, and then, the real kind of open blasting techniques started coming into play. But
Wow.
it was
Wow.
definitely quite a few years of development. And keep in mind, this is before people were using terms like dab or
Mm.
shatter or, live resins or this, none of this stuff really existed. The
Where did
goal
that
was
term come
essentially
from? Dab.
a dab. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a reference to kind of just like the amount that you want to smoke. People would be
Just a
like, "Oh,
dab.
like just
Okay.
you just need a little, just a dab, just a little
Okay.
dollop on the end of your dabber," But along with the glass blowers creating the new extraction methods, they were also creating the new consumption methods, right? And everybody was looking for the best way to smoke this stuff and still taste it, because we knew it tasted good and smelled good, but everyone's smoking it off of cigarette embers
Yeah.
or hookah coals. Like
Yeah,
that
yeah,
was the
yeah.
first main kind of popular method, was you'd ember a hookah coal and put it on like a little glass dish or stone tray, and then you kind of drop the oil onto the center, and as soon as it would start smoking, you'd put like a little tube over top and start basically freebasing this shit off of the
That's what
hookah
I'm
coal.
picturing is just some freebasing, and I think that's part of I probably part of the stigma as well, why the general public that are not familiar with can it's like there's so much that is reminiscent of hard drugs, right? Like freebasing and all the contraptions and I mean, it's still, for myself, I'm like, "Holy, there's so much here. There's so
Yeah.
much."
It's
But
it's
so
it can be very intimidating to the
yeah.
non-educated
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I've,
observer.
consumer 30 plus years, but primarily flour and, hash. And I never really I mean, especially in certain areas of Ontario. I mean, BC, you guys got exposed to a lot more. East Coast, they stuck with their weed and hash quite a bit as well. But I mean, really, I mean, you're forging new ground in a way, right?
For
So
sure.
after, you've got your large extraction opportunities, what was the deciding factor or how did you get drawn into the industry? Was it a conversation at a glass blowing event? Like what was it that said, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to go," and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you join Ad Astra first or was there a stepping stone to Ad Astra?
Oh my God. I mean, we're glossing over like
Let's
10,
go.
12 years of
Okay,
history here,
let's
but
go.
uh,
Let's go 10 to 12
yeah.
years. We can do it.
Okay, I'll give you the cliff notes here. So, glass blowers revolutionized the methods of extraction as well as consumption. All of a sudden, people are making fancy twisted glass tubes with some flair and some color and some fume and some millies and marbles stuck on there. And essentially, we're still freebasing at this point. Then we have Hash Master Cut and G Girl.
Mm,
They're pioneers in this field, and we're on Vancouver Island, and they developed the swing arm technique, with the old like little metal plate and the bell curve, and then you kind of
okay.
torch it with a blowtorch and you swing it underneath the bell curve, and then you hit it through your little bubbler. And these things were, they revolutionized the
I
game.
was gonna say fucking genius, right?
Yeah,
Like,
still very reminiscent of freebasing, but much more sophisticated. And these guys were, incredibly resourceful. They're using baling wire, a bike spoke, and a small titanium pad that you'd have to get from like a special like metal workshop. Cut the titanium into a specific size, dimple the plate, bend your spoke specifically to the parameters of your rig that
jeez.
you made. And every single one of them was, one of a kind, custom, handmade, but just revolutionized the method of smoking. Uh, then, we have people from the States like Task Rock developing highly educated and
Oh, okay,
developing
yeah.
the first kind of, well, first we had borosilicate nails, the glass blowers, once again, revolutionizing the method of consumption by creating a a red hot glass nail that sits on your joint, and you put a dome over it, and then you put
Yeah,
it in,
yeah.
and blah, blah, blah. Then, you have guys in the States revolutionizing it, coming up with new titanium nails, and then ceramic, and then quartz, and then
Yeah.
you're moving through. So, as the consumption methods got more sophisticated, the interest in really dialing in the extraction process proliferated. And so, now we're talking about, okay, which cultivars get the best yields, which ones have the best terps, like which grower is willing to supply me with their trim or this or that. And, you
Yeah,
start
yeah.
really getting into how can I scale this up? How can I make it better for everyone? And provide people with something that you can be proud of, because now multiple people are doing it. You're not the only guy anymore. There's people are starting to create brands and then selling little, labeled jars and all sorts of stuff like that. So, we move through the process. I'm essentially working in the cannabis industry full time in the legacy side, working with growers and working in gardens and doing all this stuff while also making my oil on the side. Then maybe around like 2011, 2012, you start hearing about these new closed loop devices, these
Mhm.
new stainless steel contraptions that are pieced together out of brewery equipment or pasteurization equipment, just very like industry food and beverage standard processing equipment. Um, and I can't take any credit for discovering these things, but around the time they were starting to get introduced, I think I probably had one of the first few, closed loop extractors on the West Coast here. Very difficult to get the parts through customs, very difficult to order vacuum ovens at this time. I think I remember my buddy who organized the shipment, having to go to the border and actually talk to the border, like, the cops there,
Jesus.
and them being like, what is this thing? Like, what's it for? Like, blah, blah, blah. And, he was a glass blower himself. So he was able to kind of spin this tale like, oh, we use these to, anneal the glass pieces. And once it's made, it has to go in the oven and kind of ramp down to like a kiln or something.
Yeah, yeah,
So he was able to come up with some creative excuse and they released it. And then we got all this equipment back. Um, Rented a specific place just to set all his stuff up and just really locked in and started going crazy, making shatter and waxes and butters. Now at this point, there's different outputs. We're not just whipping it all into one
yeah.
homogenized extract. We're making shatter. We're trying to make terp sauce. We're trying to make sugar waxes. All these things. It just becomes a much more commercially viable product. Over time, you move
Is there
labs.
sorry, I don't mean to
Of
interrupt there
course.
because you're telling a great story, but I'm just curious now, like as these different products spin out, is there still room for innovation and new product development? Like, I mean, you're talking a lot of things that we would have never thought of 20 years ago, right? Terp
Yeah.
sauce being one of them. Like, and then I
Mhm.
heard it must have been 10, 15 episodes ago. I forget who it was. It might have been Alana Davis at Dabble.
Yeah.
It wasn't Terp Hunter.
Shout out to Dabble, by the
Yeah,
way.
of course. Yeah. But there was something about a terp hunter, so specifically looking for a certain crop or cultivar genetic that produces beautiful trichome heads for extraction. I can't remember the term. I have
100%.
to go back now. But is there room still for new innovation? Like, and is it stumbled upon by accident, or is it you're setting out to specifically create something?
Yeah, it's the Bob Ross technique, happy accidents. It's definitely, it was such a learning curve, and not all cultivars produce a very stable shatter, and not all cultivars, are super high terpene, but they may be high potency or vice versa. And we really had no method of determining these until you put the whole load through processing and you got it out. But sometimes you'd be trying to make one product and it would come out totally different, and you'd be like, fuck, like fuck this up, and you're all like mad, but then you like go to smoke it and you're like, wait a minute, there's something
Yeah.
to this one for sure. I mean, I think there's still definitely room for innovation, but it's kind of like, I don't want to say gimmicky, but
Yeah.
there's always a new way to kind of present the same thing
Okay.
with a bit of an aesthetic twist, or slap a fancy colorful label on it and
Sure.
increase the price, and then people just assume it has a higher value. There's tons of things. I don't think all the formats have been discovered yet.
Mhm.
But
Well, I
at the
still remember
time,
like THCA crystals and your diamonds, and you're talking like when these were coming to market, I'm like, what the fuck is this stuff? Like I just,
yeah,
to me, as just so OG going, yeah, weed is flower, right? But
for
there's
sure.
so much. And then, and Alana really is the one that got me on to, her experience into dabbing. And I'm like, okay, you're talking about the clarity, you're talking about the taste. So I'll get there now. But it's just, it's one of those things that I don't really think about it that much until all of a sudden there's a new product, right?
Yeah. At the time, I think it was somewhat of a revolution in cannabis consumption, because you were actually seeing a huge conversion rate of people trying these extracts for the first time and just being like, "Oh yeah, this is what I want to fuck with for
Yeah.
sure." Like, and even from like a discretion standpoint, like the methods of consumption, you could, have a big dab sesh and your hands didn't smell like smoke, and
Yeah.
your clothes didn't reek like you just smoked a fatty in a hot box with your friends. It's like, um, it was changing the way you could consume, with discretion, and lowering a little bit of stigma,
Yeah.
of the average consumer. It was becoming a much more sophisticated process. The methods of consumption were becoming quite artistic and creative, and I think it just blossomed into a whole subculture, like a
Mhm.
really prolific subculture, in my opinion. But hey, these things existed in the 70s, man. Like you can go back and read a High Times magazine from the late 70s when they were still like advertising cocaine, and like half of the centerfolds were like naked models with like kilos in front of them and stuff. It was a
Yeah.
totally different time for drug culture. But you go to the back of those High Times magazines and you see these little, like comic book style ads for products that you could buy at this. And I remember being in cannabis culture, they had a huge vault of vintage High Times magazines, and I was still in my teens then, and seeing an ad for this modified fondue fountain, like literally a fondue fountain, but instead of putting cheese or chocolate in there, you fill the trough with weed and alcohol, and it just circulates the alcohol through this fondue fountain.
Jesus.
But these things are heated, so as the alcohol goes up and cascades down the fondue fountain, it's evaporating the alcohol out and leaving the oil on the external
Wow.
frame. So
Jeez.
I was looking at things like that and being like, damn, like motherfuckers were innovating back then, like in the
Yeah.
70s. And people knew, what oils, hash oils and things like that. This isn't new. And I think even, you know, dating back to like, oh God, I mean, I don't wanna misquote the dates here, but hundreds and hundreds of years ago, when people were cultivating cannabis, on a large scale, and it was a huge international trade item, people were using heat and pressure to squeeze the
Mhm.
oils out of cannabis. I mean, the cannabis is mentioned in the Bible and in the Torah and like all this stuff. I think it's referred to as cannabothum, and these holy anointing oils that they were used, they used cannabis in all these things.
Yeah.
So people had these extraction methods forever. It's just history is cyclical, and we're
Yeah.
now just coming up. Now the technology makes it quite a bit easier for us to produce these things. But yeah, man, I mean, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here,
No, no,
but
I like it. I like it because
to
it's,
get back,
it's history and yeah, bring us back.
yeah, to get back to the story, okay, so now we're in the future. We have all these stainless steel components. Extraction methods are getting very sophisticated. I'm, quitting my day jobs to go, run oil for people full time on site at their grows, starting to do commissioned extractions for other people. It's just becoming quite an ecosystem. And at the time, there was very few people that were willing to just do this work for
Mhm.
other people. Most people were doing it for themselves, in-house, keeping it very close, protecting the market, keeping the price high. But I'm a man of the people, and all my friends wanted to smoke this shit. And I had outlets for it myself, and so a lot of the times, not only was I extracting it for these people, the old school co-manufacturing contracts,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use a new school term,
Yeah, it
but
was
I
a
was also,
handshake then, not
yeah,
a
but
7-page document.
no, exactly, no non-compete clauses
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So but I was very involved in the community, so I was also a means of distributing these products as well. I would make it for these people, then I would take it into the city and I would sell it for
Mm.
these people as well. It was becoming quite financially lucrative for me. I was, quite independent at a very early age through these methods. Kind of, openly incriminating myself here, but we'll get to the statute
Statute
of
of limitations
limitations
is yeah.
situation after. Exactly. Yeah, no, man, it just became a lot more sophisticated. I started really focusing on it. My relationships with growers were getting, more solid, and my methods and capabilities were increasing. And I was just staying at the forefront of you know, this culture. And
Mhm.
like I said, once again, like my nod goes to the glass blowers who were constantly innovating in order to kind of keep pace with the extractors, or it might have even been vice versa. The extractors were trying to desperately
I've always
innovate to
wondered
keep
that.
pace with the
Yeah,
glass blowers. It kind of went hand in hand.
yeah.
And I'll never take for granted, like the influence that the glass blowers had on this community as well. Um, Fast forward, maybe what is it, 2000 and maybe like 2017 at this point, I believe. And now it's becoming quite a widespread thing. We're mailing it across the country. We're taking it to other cities. We're, loading up our trunks with it and driving other places and stuff like that. And, eventually that led me to, being highly scrutinized by authority figures.
Yeah.
And it only takes one time to get caught with a huge trunk load full of equipment and processed material and proceeds of crime and prohibited
Yeah.
devices and all these things. And I wound up catching some very serious charges for this, which was a huge awakening for me because, you know, I
Mhm.
had been so immersed in this community and so desensitized to it, you know, like we spoke about earlier, that you just kind of never see it being illegal. You never look
Mhm.
at it like
Yep.
that. But I mean, at the time, it was still considered refining an illicit substance, and the process of extracting it, purifying it, and selling it was still, you know, top notch on their schedule um, for illegality.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was a you know, a huge shock to my life and my lifestyle. Totally derailed, you know, everything I had going on. Not to mention, prior to that, I had been robbed and had my doors kicked in, and you know, had to move spots and this and that. People, it's
Mhm.
starting to be, you know, like the Jack boys are figuring it out, and they're realizing that if you kick in one of these extraction labs, you're going to get all the equipment,
Yeah.
all of the input material, all the output material, like, and you know, the dab rigs and the shoes and the clothes and
Yeah,
the
everything they
jewelry
need.
and stuff. It's
Yeah.
like basically everything that a jack boy wants is like at this one spot.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had to take some serious L's, but none as serious as, you know, catching some significant trafficking charges. At the time, I was facing 2 years plus a day federal time, you know, for cannabis. And keep in mind, 2017 was the legalization year,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
um, they don't make the laws retroactive. I think
No.
I got arrested for this stuff in September, October, something like that, and they legalized in like November. You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
I
Jeez.
had I was so close to making it, but I mean, they didn't legalize hydrocarbon extraction till quite a bit after that, anyways.
Mhm.
So, you know, at this point, I'm caught up in the system. I'm, you know, I had been released, but, you know, still making many court appearances. And, you know, I think my lawyer, it cost me almost $40,000 to defend myself for almost a year and a half,
Jeez.
only to finally make it to my sentencing and, you know, strike a good deal. Ended up getting 2.5 years house arrest, which is still very detrimental to my
Yeah. Yeah.
trajectory.
Jeez.
You know, severed so many relationships. You know, my family is now getting involved. They're super concerned. At this time, I'm still in my, you know, late 20s, mid to late 20s. You know, my family's having interventions for me, trying to get me to, you know, quit and go back to working for the family company and doing this. And, you know, I was delivering furniture for almost 10 years, you know, like leading up to this. So it's like the last thing I want to go back to is fucking moving people's furniture in and out of their house when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
had already
Not the thing you
had a
wanna
little,
deliver. Yeah.
yeah, and I'd already had a little taste of the good life, you know, and I was like,
Yeah.
fuck, I don't want to go back to working for someone else. I want to work for myself.
Mhm.
But I was already quite actively involved in the music industry as well.
Okay.
Just prior to my bust,
Mhm.
I was, you know, I had already quit, you know, any sort of day job I had to become a full-time touring rapper.
Oh,
So
man.
you know, was booking lots of shows, you know, making anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 a show, rapping with my group and playing, you know, 3 to 4 shows a month. And so
Wow.
you know, I had decent income just coming from the music industry. And I was planning on making that my career path, and the
Yeah.
kind of extraction stuff was just going to be a stepping stone and, you know, kind of my funding to build my music career, which you know, I think that's common for a lot of people in this industry. It's like, you know, you don't see yourself doing this into your 60s. It's always kind of, you set up this play and you want to run it into your 30s and then kind of get out. But it derailed my music career. I tried to claim my income as you know, the results of my music career, and
Yeah.
that just led to a civil forfeiture of of
Oh,
so much of my property because
oh
and
my
and,
god.
and my assets, because they asked me to produce, you know, tax information saying that, okay, well, if you really made this through music, where's all your tax information? And of course, you know, that's all, you know, I'm not filing for my
No.
income from like
Yeah.
the music
I don't have
industry.
all my
So
mileage documents. What are you talking about?
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
jeez.
So, you know, it just compounds and painted quite a clear picture to them as to, you know, what I was using this industry for.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, amazing learning experience. Obviously, you don't get where you are without, you know, hitting a few major
Of course,
roadblocks,
of course.
literally, you
Yes,
know, and
literally.
then,
So what was
um,
it, you've got 2.5 years of house arrest. That's a lot of thinking time, right? That's a lot
yes,
of
and
fine creed time. What do I wanna do?
exactly.
What was going on during that time when you're like, okay, legalization's happening? I mean, obviously, like what a kick in the balls, though, right? They're
Yeah.
legalizing and you're in court.
Yeah, at the time, I was dating a lawyer too, and, well, she's I mean, not she wasn't quite a lawyer
And
then,
she
but, you
still
know,
charge you 40 grand? No.
no, she wasn't my lawyer. That would be
Yeah, I
conflict
get
of
it.
interest for
Yeah, for
sure.
sure.
And I think in the law community they call it conduct unbecoming when a
Oh, right.
lawyer is in a relationship with someone who has federal trafficking charges
Yeah.
and supports them. So I mean, I put her through a lot. Bless her soul. Not going to say her name obviously, but she's stood by me. I had a lot of good insight into the process, and she was going to a prestigious law school and doing a practicum at another firm and stuff like
Oh,
that. So
wow.
I had a lot of the legal insight and a
Mhm.
lot of legal um, opinion to help me. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, 2.5 years was a long time. No work release until the end of 2 years. Then the last 6 months I got work release, but I had an hour of release a week split into two 30-minute periods, and only for the necessity of life purposes. So only to get your food, do some, banking,
Jeez.
or, collect whatever you need to just not wither away inside of your apartment. I'm being checked on, 3 times a day by officers at random hours of the night. It could be 4 a.m. and they're
What?
pounding on my door, making sure yeah, I mean, they're phasing out the ankle monitor program for anyone that isn't like a repeat or violent or sex offender. So most people getting like minor drug crime charges don't have ankle monitors. But at the time I
It
was
sounds
living
like
in
an ankle monitor would be better than being woken up at 4 in the morning. I don't know,
no,
man. Like,
I mean,
I don't know.
not really. I kind of found it like a fun little cat and
Yeah,
mouse
I
game
guess
in the
if you're
end.
spending that much
I
time.
I had an
Jeez.
ACM I had an ACMPR license, so I was able to present that in court, and I was granted the permission to still consume cannabis. But normally,
Okay.
if you're getting charged for this stuff, you have like a no consumption, no alcohol,
Yeah.
no drugs, no mind altering substances whatsoever. You're getting piss tested, you're doing all this stuff. You're seeing your PO once a week and checking in with them, and they're
Wow.
ready to violate you for anything that you've done wrong. But, yeah, I mean, it was kind of fun for me being able to smoke cannabis legally while on house arrest. It's like kind of every stoner's dream to just like be confined to your house and have
Yeah.
nothing to do other than
Video
smoke your
games
bong and,
and
yeah,
weed.
play video games. And no, I used my time pretty wisely. Did a religious studies program, and, like, read the Bible and the Torah and the Quran, and just to use the time to, like, explore everything I was interested in, but never really had the time to do, because now you just have all the time in the world. The cops are knocking on my door, and I'm just answering in my boxers, holding my bong, like, breathing a cloud out, and they're just like, "Oh my god," like, "What?" And the funniest part is I did my house arrest sentence in the same small city that I went to high school in. So the cops showing up to my door are literally people that I like went to high
Yeah.
school with, or like, were in my grad class, or like it was like my
Or that
liaison
you
officer
sold
from.
something to at
Yeah,
some point in
exactly.
time.
So
Yeah.
so they're answering the door and just being like, "Oh, Creed, like, oh, we
Yeah.
always knew we'd see each other like this again,"
Oh
like it's
my
just
god.
so many funny little interactions like that. But no, it was good. I mean, I had a very established network at this time.
Mhm.
I wasn't just working alone. I had people working with me. I had auxiliaries and drivers and doing stuff like that. So I was able to kind of keep a little bit of my empire going while
Mhm.
sitting on the bench, which was really good. I had some people I really trusted, good friends that were willing to kind of keep the dream alive, and they did. So not only that, I was making income, like
Yeah.
significant income, just to
Nice.
sit on my ass all day and drink beer and
I'm
smoke weed and
picturing
play video
Pineapple
games.
Express and, you
It's
know.
it's very Pineapple Express-esque, but yeah, good times, good learning lesson. Eventually I get work release, and the only industry they'll allow me to work in is the music industry, because that's what I had been claiming as my,
Yeah, yeah.
defense the whole time. So my probation officer is now, like, okay, well, you're at the work release period. What do you want to do? And
I want to
uh
extract. Let me extract.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, a couple good friends of mine had a cannabis centric media studio in Vancouver, called Studio 710. Shout out Studio 710. It was on the top floor of a strip club building with
Okay.
like tons of other stuff going on in it, and we had a huge outdoor patio and all these private little studio rooms, and they were mostly just doing podcasts at the time. But I kind of was like, hey, like, let's expand this into a fully functioning recording studio, and we can get artists in here. We can provide full media packages for artists where they can come record their songs, but also have all the like camera angles of the creative process. And
Cool.
there's like, a camera in the booth and a camera in the engineer's room. And then
Nice.
you're sharing, basically the artists can leave with a total media package of,
Yeah, yeah.
the whole creative process being documented that they can use to promote and this and that. And I think it was pretty unique at the time. And so we set that off and, had some good success for the time. And I was really getting back into music, writing and recording a lot. Obviously, had tons of time to think and a whole lot of new things to
Yeah.
rap about.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I was writing some of the best music I've ever written, and working with a lot of artists that I look up to and idolize and that are still very successful, to this day. But as soon as they took those shackles off and let me back at it, man, I was right back in the lab. I may or may not have even snuck out to the lab a few times while I was supposed to be at home. There's always some tricky ways you can get around it. I had basically embarrassed the officers so many times by answering the door in my underwear. It was like a psychological game I was playing with them, where I knew eventually they wouldn't want to keep seeing me in my underwear.
Yeah.
So eventually one of the main officers that would come check on me was just like, "Look, here's my cell phone number. Call me right now, so I have your number. Anytime I'm showing up, I'm gonna call you before, and I want you to get dressed before you answer the door and address me." And so it's like, okay, this guy, I just baited this guy into like telling me when he's gonna be there. So I kind of
Jeez.
always knew his schedule and his shift and when he was coming around, and I was able
Yeah.
to kind of use that sneaky against him.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, it was fun, man. Then once I, kind of finished this and got back in the game, now it's been years and the technology for extraction has just like exploded. It's just, we're seeing like an exponential increase in access to the equipment,
Mhm.
and the sophistication of the methods has popped off. And I always had a very close relationship with the manufacturers and distributors of the equipment. So it led me to being kind of like one of the top legacy market consultants, where even when I was on house arrest, I had companies and extractors calling me to, walk me through this, do this, like, "Oh, I'll pay you if you teach my guy how to do this," and blah, blah,
Mm.
blah. So I was really taking advantage of that. And I think, I still had about 3 months left on my work release program when I got my first call from an LP. And,
Mm.
I almost was like skeptical. I was like, wait, like, who is this
Yeah.
motherfucker? Like,
It
am I
seems like
being,
they're trying to
am I
bait
being
me.
in, yeah, I was like, am I being entrapped, or like, what's going on? Like, they want me to like explain all of my history and my experiences and this, that's like a phone interview, and I'm thinking
Yeah.
the whole time, I'm like, okay, this doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem right. But I did a little research and I found out who was behind the company and who was involved in it. And it's all, you know, comes from the legacy market as well, the same place, same ideologies, same mentalities. We ended up uh, really relating on a lot of topics. And they're like, okay, so when can you come into the office? And I'm like, well, I got another 3 months left on my like work
Oh,
release sentence.
jeez.
I was like, I still have to check in every morning, every night with my PO. I still have cops coming by to check on me. I was like, at this point, basically, like, I don't know what to tell you. I'm still under conditions.
Yeah.
And they were just like, no problem. Call us in 3 months and you got a job. And I was just like,
Nice.
fuck. I was like, damn, maybe I done did it. Like, maybe I got my way out the game. Like, it's crazy. It was a very like enlightening experience almost, to also hear that even though I had been sitting out of the game for 2 years, anyone who called anyone to ask anything about extraction at that time was getting referred to me. And
Nice. Nice.
my business and the equipment manufacturers' businesses were growing symbiotically, where when they had clients coming in saying, hey, I want to put together an extraction lab, but I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, they would send people to me as the consultant. And then if people came to me and said, hey, I'm looking for an extraction lab, I know you're the guy, but where do I get the shit? I'd send
Mm.
it to them. And then, it just was a perfect cycle of stimulating each other's businesses.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, 3 months goes by. I'm fresh out. I'm ready to go, and I pull up to Ad Astra, and have a nice board meeting there with all the powers that be. And I really at that it was a lot more serious once I got there and sat at the table of
Yeah.
bosses, and they're all sitting there like judging me and asking me all these questions, and I'm trying to be as honest and forthcoming as possible, but I'm still very rough around the edges, hadn't quite got my corporate chops lined up yet. But I knew that they could provide the kind of security that was necessary for me to keep exploring extractions as a
Mm.
passion without taking the huge risk that comes with it. And now, I have a full-time trafficking record, federal trafficking
Yeah.
record, and so all these other things, and my license is still flagged. And if I pass a cop, doesn't matter if they're going the opposite direction at 100 kilometers an hour, they're slamming on their brakes, pulling U-turns in the
Yeah.
middle of the street, and dragging me out of the car. I had to submit to, search of my vehicle, willingly. Like I no longer had the right to kind of deny an officer to search my
Oh
vehicle
my
and stuff like
God.
that. So I was just going through it left and right. My family was pissed and everything, but I knew this had to be, my way out.
Yeah.
And so I took the contract for substantially less than I was making in the legacy market,
Dude,
which was
we
like,
we all did when we went to the regulated
yeah.
side of this industry.
Yeah, it was like it was like taking a pay cut, and it was a little bit, disheartening, but the security alone
Yeah.
is worth it. Everyone's got to grow up sometime, and it came with a little bit of increased maturity where I was just like, yeah, fuck, man, I gotta stop dragging my feet. I'm still waist deep in the legacy market, but I'm looking for that ladder, to
Mhm.
climb out,
Yep.
and we do the facility walkthroughs. I'm meeting the people. I meet the guy that's going to be my lead hand in the department, and he's like, young and passionate and motivated. Never seen a trap house in his life. Like these guys are coming in. Like I said, they're silver spooned in the industry. They've only came up in the legal market. So I'm giving him the crash course, showing him all my techniques, getting him up to speed, um, taking him out and about to see what it was like in the legacy market,
Oh,
showing
wow.
him some of these legacy market shops and just showing him, like, this is how we used to do it. This is why we do it this way. And that's how we're going to do it in the legal shop,
Yeah, yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
using all of my legacy market techniques and all my legacy market experience, and this is why we're going to do it this way, because we want to make
Wow.
products that replicate that legacy market, and
Yeah.
shout out Big Tasty. He's my right hand man to this day still. um Equally as effective and sophisticated with the extraction methods as I. And yeah, over 2 years out at Astra, we took between Big Tasty and I, we designed and developed, over 100 SKUs as well. With Paul Dillon, I'll shout out Paul here too. One of the most prolific, sales and marketing guys in the industry, in my opinion.
Mhm.
Also, just a real G, just like knows what's up with the legacy market side, knows what the consumers want, knows how to sell it, knows how to get it to the provinces, just an incredibly charismatic and charming individual. Have so much respect for Paul and everybody in the Ad Astra team. It was kind of a super group, to be honest with you. All the right people in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
And then we developed Endgame, which just popped off,
Yeah.
and
I'll say.
they allowed that brand to kind of be an extension of my experiences in the
Mhm.
industry, which at this point I had amassed so many stories. And so um not just in the cannabis industry, but through my involvement in the music industry, and also being a career graffiti writer as well. I've been painting in the streets and in freight yards for damn near 20 years, and the
Wow.
the you know the collection of these cultures and the experiences that they all bring just made a perfect melting pot for a brand that was a direct reflection of my experiences. And we kind of steered it in that direction, and they kind of made me the face and image of the brand. And then I started showing up to all the trade shows and industry events and all stuff like that, and just
Yeah. Well, it
kind
was
of.
with Ad Astra, and I think specifically through the work with Endgame and the development of those products, that was it 2023 that you won Extractor of the Year? Is that what it was? Extractor of the Year or
Was it 23 or 24? I to be
somewhere
honest with
somewhere
you,
in there? But I mean, a ton
yeah.
of award-winning products and,
Yeah.
you know
I think we won like five awards, consecutively in that one year, and they were all, the ones you want to win, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
extraction specialist of the year, brand of the year, concentrate product of the year, brand experience of the year, like all these, just like, we're winning them from Grow Up, and we're winning them from Kind, and we're winning
Yeah.
them from like the regional, awards and stuff like that. So it was really, yes, just awesome to get that recognition,
Yeah.
and just see that, it's not even the awards, like that really kind of, it pales in comparison to the feeling that you get when you actually meet the bud tenders or the consumers, or you see someone on the street wearing the merch that like you designed,
Yeah, yeah,
it's your
yeah.
own art, it's your own concept, it's your own everything, and then you talk to them and they're just like, dude, I fuck with Endgame so hard, like, yeah, like this and that. It's like that's really, the epitome of it for me, is like seeing the effect that the brand actually had on like
Yeah.
real consumers, not just on the corporate side. Like I couldn't really care less about that. Although,
Yeah.
seeing the sales number is nice, and doing
Well, of course.
multi-million dollar months is amazing. And, watching your numbers go like this is awesome. But I'm still just like a stoner hippie from the trap, like at the end of the day. And for me, the most gratifying part was like really talking to the consumers and the bud tenders and the shop managers that were just like, damn, dude, like this is the only brand that people kind of connect with. Well, not the only one. I can't say that, but this is a brand that people really do relate to
Yeah.
because of the association of these countercultures and subcultures as an amalgamation, in the cannabis
Yeah, yeah,
industry.
yeah.
It was kind of rare at the time, and I think that's what I'm most proud of in
Yeah.
my work with at
Well, when
Astra.
we connected, I mean, you had gotten to a point, and let's, leads us to where you are now, which is Leaf Infusions, but you're getting to a point where, and we don't need to discuss why, but you kind of were just ready to take a break. It was just, a little bit of peace moment.
For sure.
And I don't know who was involved. By the way, Keith says to say hi.
Yeah, shout out Keith,
But
shout out AVEO.
I'm like, what's going on? Where are you now? Because Keith was like, you got to get Creed on. I'm like, funny enough, we're talking about getting him on the pod. And, now you land at Leaf, but what was that draw to Leaf? And then, I want to understand creating award-winning brands. Like, you've got High Key now, right? And
Mhm.
I want to get into that and understand that. But what drew you to
For sure.
Leaf?
Yeah, well, fuck. Um, Ad Astra was growing at, a exponential pace. And it was still a bit of a culture shock for me. The corporate culture shock
Yeah.
was very real. I still wanted to just do things my way. And anyone can tell you, like us extractors, we're very, very stubborn. We're very particular about our methods. We all have egos much larger than ourselves, and sometimes it's very hard to like, keep yourself in check. So, things, a corporate restructuring will happen, or a department gets downsized, or people get moved around within the business, and it just changes the vibes. And things kind of get shaken up a little bit. And at the time we're managing 120 SKUs roughly, across the country. And I mean, to some of the bigger guys, I know that that's not even a lot, but for me
That's
to
still a
come
lot.
from, yeah, yeah, to come from, relatively humble beginnings, then to, have to be just so focused on product consistency and, maintaining SKUs. And it's like, you could have a top selling SKU for 2 years, but that cultivar that you were originally extracting might not even be existing anymore.
Right.
And then you have to come up with very, shall I say, creative methods to, keep these SKUs on the shelf, without deviating too much. And it just got really stressful. I was starting to get worn down. People around me were starting to get worn down. The compounding stress of maintaining these things was soul crushing. And then, it just takes a small shift in the business culture to just tell you, like, fuck, maybe this isn't for me anymore.
Mhm.
I I was at a couple uh events with some cannabis industry executives, and I kind of had just let it slip in the circle that, maybe I was looking for a change or a new opportunity, something fresh.
Every
And
ear and eye in the room pop up. Oh, really? He's
yeah,
looking for
well,
something new, is he?
essentially, like, I just see these guys just pull out their phones right away and just start sending out emails. And within 48 hours, I had multiple contract offers, across the country,
Wow.
which I was, so incredibly grateful for. It's like there's nothing kind of scarier than thinking about, ditching where you've been
Yeah.
established for so long. And especially because, I have a very personal connection to Endgame. It was very much like an extension of myself. The consideration to leave at Astra was not a light one, and I
I bet.
still, I love the people I work with, and yeah, it was not easy. But I knew I needed a change if I wasn't gonna go into like a manic depressive spiral. Um, and yeah, I think Keith may have been the one that was responsible, for forwarding my information to Braden over here at Leaf, and we had a great call, great conversation. I came in, I talked to them, just seemed like the right play. Obviously, I had to, make sure I did my due diligence over at Astra, but they were more than willing to kind of not hinder my progression through the
Mhm.
industry. And Leaf Infusions, a much kind of younger, kind of budding brand and company here. I just saw it as a new opportunity to kind of start fresh,
Yeah.
get some of that power back, and just regain my passion for extraction. And then after meeting the people here and just seeing how open they were to just have me completely design the program from ground up and choose my team and work with people that I really care about,
Yeah.
it was just a no-brainer.
It's like a
So yeah.
restart, right? Just a reset, and you can kinda understand. And I this is where I'm, because I think when you had joined, which you haven't been there that long, really, I mean, in the grand scheme
Yeah.
of things,
Yeah.
but there's biggies, which we can see behind you.
Yeah.
High key, is that yours? Or I mean, with team development, but high key, I don't think existed when you joined originally, right?
No, it's a new brand. We actually started developing, a new brand for Leaf here as soon as I came through the gates. Basically, we just like hit the ground running. Came up with a few different concepts and stuff. We still have some good ones in the vault. High key. Actually, shout out to Anna on our team here. We were just brainstorming words and phrases and terms, and kind of just wanted it to be, colloquial but still kind of relevant. And
Mhm.
I think we glazed across high key, and then I think after typing it into Google, it came up and said it's one of the top 5 most popular slang terms of 2024 or something
Okay.
like that. And then I
Wow.
think it just kind of was a good kind of mass appeal starting point. I didn't
Yeah.
want to go too counterculture, too alienating. We want something that, my mom or dad could walk in and still want to
Yeah,
buy,
yeah.
but also someone that's, in their early 20s that's, listening to gangster rap or whatever. Just like, could be anything. But we wanted to have a kind of a mass appeal brand. And I think we all just put our heads together on it and came up with some cool stuff, still incorporating elements of graffiti and hip
Mhm,
hop and
mhm.
stuff like that to it. But
So do you start with the concept of the brand will be this, and then we're going to feed these products in? Do you think of it more like a scientist, an artist, a legacy purist? Like, do you I've got this product, this is the product, now we need to come up with a brand. Which one comes first?
yeah, it's definitely an amalgamation of all of those things, and you have to make compromises and sacrifices sometimes to your integrity in respects to, like some of those elements. But I think, Braden had a good idea of what type of products he wanted to offer.
Mhm.
And they aligned very well with like, the program that I create. And one thing about Leaf Infusions that's super unique is we mostly only work with fresh frozen material.
Mm.
So all of our extracts are live resins essentially. And that to me was like a huge bonus. There's only so many thousands of kilos of dry, dusty trim you can extract before you're looking for something else. Um, yeah, and his concept of, just going only fresh frozen products aligned with the kind of product and brand development that I wanted to introduce. And then, I still wanted it to be authentic to me,
Mm.
but not exclusive to me and,
Right,
my
right.
community and my culture. So I think we did a really good job of balancing the needs of the consumer with my ego and his aspirations, to kind of come up with just a small but serious product line of,
Mhm.
connoisseur quality premium products. And, as long as I can have faith in the fact that my products are premium, a lot of the branding stuff comes second. It's like if you
Mhm.
build it, they will come. It's like if the products are good enough, you could call it practically whatever, and you can still win over the connoisseur consumer.
Yeah.
But that's a little naive as well, because sometimes people just want the colorful, flashy
Sure.
banners and the
I mean, it
flavors
all
and
looks
this and
good,
that.
but at
So
the end of the day, it has to resonate with the consumer, right? So getting them to
yeah,
try it once is step one. If the product and quality is where it is and it matches, I think this is the big one that some are still misunderstanding in the industry. The quality and the price have to match, right? So if it's if it's boof, then charge that, right?
yeah,
But if it's
for sure.
premium, sure, understand that. But I want to come back to fresh frozen. When did fresh
Yeah,
frozen become the thing? I mean, in my days, it would be like, "Oh, fuck, this is a horrible crop. I'm gonna have to extract it," and I would freeze it,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
That would be
Well,
different. But I mean,
yeah,
early days for you probably wasn't a thing, really, was it? Or maybe it was. I don't know.
yeah. I think I tried to do my first live resin extraction in maybe 2012, 2013.
Okay.
So we were already fully aware of the methods, but the technology was limiting.
Mhm.
You got to keep the materials frigid, -20, -30 during the whole extraction process if you don't want to start extracting all the waters and
Right, right.
chlorophylls and plant fats and waxes. But everyone was using dry ice as their like main cooling method, right? You have to go to
Mhm.
Praxair and get 100 pounds of dry ice and then bring it to your shop, and then you'd be shoveling it into these open sleeves on the outside of your columns, and then making slurries with like alcohol and all these things to try and get as much surface area contact. And
Jeez.
um, these it was very limiting in capabilities. But I mean, the hash guys were doing this already too. I mean,
Mhm.
they were taking fresh frozen material, spinning it for bubble. This was pre-rosin,
Yeah.
but people were working with fresh frozen. Anyone that had done it and done it successfully knew that they were onto something huge, because the terpene retention was so much higher, the THCA contents, the spectrum of cannabinoids, and just the overall experience was just so new and
Mhm.
exciting. So yeah, people have been working with fresh frozen for a long time. Just not all LPs are really set up to do it. Not every lab is tailored to
It's
fresh
an
frozen.
investment too, right? Like, I mean, you've gotta
Definitely.
not only source it, you've gotta store it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So here at Leaf, we have, a full like walk-in commercial freezer, right?
Nice.
That like a big restaurant would have. I think we could hold fuck 10,000 kilos if we really wanted to, or more.
Wow.
And then the lab itself has, multiple deep freezes in line. So you could pack and prep the material, then bring it to the lab, then keep it in the deep freeze. So it's going straight from the freezers into the unit, which is already at -20. And it's the whole life cycle of the plant. Basically, it never thaws until
Perfect.
you're
Spec
done extracting
designed.
it. So
Yeah, I love
yeah.
it.
So
What's the
so that
what's the biggest misconception still about extractions or extracts in the market?
I'd say probably that, people are they think, chemical solvent exposure is somehow like bad for them, or if they consume it, they're going to be inhaling butane or this or one of
Right.
these things. The sophisticated purging methods, um, you know, are developed so that none of these residual solvents are left in the product. And
Mhm.
there's so many purists that are just like, oh, like I don't want to smoke that because it's made with chemicals or this and
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Especially some of the older heads, the BH no guys. Like they yeah, they're always skeptical, but I mean, rightfully so. If you're a shitty extractor and you're lazy and you're not doing your due diligence, you're going to be putting out a product that most likely still has residual solvents in it. I
Mhm.
mean, a clean butane, when it's combusted, the only byproducts from what I understand are CO2 and H2O. So it's not exactly neurotoxic or like anything like that. But I think these these like preconceived ideas come from back when everyone was using like lighter refill
Yeah,
butane,
yeah,
to
yeah.
extract, and it has mercaptans in it and denaturing agents and things like that that were neurotoxic, and that the rotten egg smell and stuff like that. So you
Yeah,
can detect gas leaks and things like that. Back in the day, like yeah, that was definitely like a cause for
yeah.
concern. But
Like
the
in your
method,
bedroom with a Kinder Egg, yeah. A little bit
yeah, let's
different.
don't throw shade on me now. You know
Yeah,
how I think.
no, but I mean, it's not something you thought of, and you're right, it still gets for some reason, it gets a bad rap, and I don't know why. I know, even out of the US, crazy talented hydrocarbon extractors, and their
Yeah.
products are doing very well, but they take shade for that too,
Yeah.
right? And
Of
like, I mean,
course.
especially you get into the Reddit side. If if the regs were to change tomorrow, allowing different products, different opportunities, is there anything in the back of your mind you're like, "Oh yeah, I really want to try something." And maybe you don't want to say that because if the regs do change, someone takes it. But is there anything that you could focus on if the regs were to change?
Well, I mean, and this, I mean, it's probably the most sensitive one, but ppm limits,
Mm,
anytime you're removing undesirable, from your extract, you end up removing desirables from your extract. I mean, you can
okay.
only pull, you put a live resin oil into a vacuum oven at a purging temperature and leave it in there for 3 days. Like you can imagine how many terpenes you're pulling out of that extract, right? So, I mean, to reach a sub 5,000 ppm limit, usually you have to remove a lot of the things that make that oil so unique. I
Mhm.
mean, and this is up for debate. I'm a pseudoscientist here. I by no means have any degrees, and by no means do we have the like long-term research to really study the exposure to parts per million of butane or propane. But I do think that there is something to explore there in maybe the fact that it's not necessarily the residual solvent that is a massive health issue. It's just the process of smoking in general and
Mhm.
consuming these oils that is the health issue. But I mean, any educated consumer, has the right to make that choice for themselves.
Sure.
And I just think that there is a little more study that needs to be done to really prove why the federal government has set these types of limits
Mhm.
on extracts. Um,
I'm not gonna hold my breath
uh,
on money for studying anymore. I was,
yeah,
and I was hopeful.
I know.
I mean, there's some that are doing it, and some LPs have committed funding to it, and I love what Dr., Jacqueline Shan has done and is doing, but, I mean, it takes capital, right? And it's a tough sell-off when it's not gonna go to the pharma side, and if it was with the pharma side, you might get a din, but then there's more money exposure as well. Like, it's just it's
100%.
such a strange industry still, right?
Yeah.
What
And
gets you
it's funny.
excited? What gets you excited about the next year, 2 years working with Leaf product development? Where do you really see yourself and the products that are coming out?
Honestly, I want to be like back back in there with the people, like engaging with the bud tenders and the frontline employees in this industry, the people who like shape and craft the taste of the public. It's like our system here, especially with like individual provincial regulation and then the stores having to choose what they want to buy from the provinces and then, taking risks on products and all this stuff. It's I wish there was just a way these stores could be more confident in like buying their products, recommending their products, and fostering an environment where like the retail customer really gets all the information and
Mhm.
education that they need to like make the right choices. And I think over the next few years, I see myself focusing a lot on consumer education. The differences, like you said, the differences between distillates and live resins and terp sauces and sugar waxes and what benefits one has over the other, or why choose one for your specific consumption method, or just all these different things. Even if it came to like lobbying the federal government, like I would be interested in being like part of a educational board
Mhm.
or special task force that helps um, shape the policy federally from a federal level,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then seeing, and assisting in that like trickle down effect of relieving some of these regulations and increasing education access and training for
yeah.
bud tenders and consumers, and just I think there's a big lack of understanding just in general around extracts, how they can benefit you, who they can benefit,
Yeah,
and how
yeah.
they should be applied. So
Well,
I think, yeah, education is where I kind of
I
see
like
myself for
that.
the
I
next
like
couple
it
of
a
years.
lot. And you're right. I think even again, 30 plus years consumption, it's still a new space, new territory for me. It's not scary. It's just you got to take the time to learn it and understand it. And I see the opportunity for those categories to grow. Honestly, fast forward a decade, I have a feeling that the extract side of the business will be far greater than what we're seeing flower, pre rolls, vapes, right?
Yeah,
It's going to take education to get there. As you know, the new coming consumer, they're not necessarily going in, and they're certainly not getting recommended, oh, you should try this sauce, you should
yeah,
try this butter, right?
for
Because
sure.
then it comes with a whole other set of complex understanding of how do I even consume it.
Exactly.
You've covered this as we've been discussing, but I want to get it just in one spot, like bookend it in a way,
Yeah.
which is,
Facts.
so no shortcuts, right? I've seen that multiple times. It's synonymous with the name Creed Taylor. What does it mean though? And what do you draw from for the legacy market that you refuse to compromise on?
To put it bluntly, man, like you fuck around, you find out. Like back in the legacy days, like you're lucky you didn't get punched in the face for selling someone some boof, you know?
Yeah.
Like you like, you put out a bad product, like people will just straight up pull up on you, you know? Like
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
no it's a little different now, but it's like I keep that same mentality where it's like my name is my business card. Like my product is my like it is a direct extension of myself. And it's like if I don't take pride in that, like just that, then like I have nothing, you know? And it's like I don't care about any of the accolades, any of the corporate success, any of that shit. It's like for me, it's literally about the dope. Like if I'm cooking the firest dope possible and I'm smoking it and it's all I want to smoke in my head stash, then it's like that's that's all I wanna do, you know? And, I just think that's what drives me to kind of continue making products that are, of the highest quality and of the highest standard is the fact that it's like, you know what? I might be at one of these conferences or conventions one day, and I don't ever wanna have someone pull up to me and be like, "Yo, man, this shit is fucking garbage," you know? It's like
Oh my
and just get
God.
called or like it would just be the most embarrassing thing ever, so I gotta
Yeah.
stand on business. I gotta, like, really hold it down, and I have a responsibility not just to myself, but to the community and other extractors to continuously provide, a cutting edge industry leading product without regression or backtracking or compromise or shortcuts at all. It's like
Yeah.
my name is my name, my name is my standard, my business, my oil represents me. It's like your work ethic, like you work with
Hmm.
someone and they have shitty work ethic or they don't get this done. It's like that's a direct reflection of who they are as a person, how they operate. And my father always heavily instilled in me that it's like it doesn't matter what you do. Like I don't care what it is. Like if you're not doing it to your highest capability, knowing that when you put that out for other people to see and interact with, that you're not gonna like, if you've made any concessions in your own uh for your own standards,
Hmm.
it's gonna come back on you, yeah, and even if it doesn't, you're the one that has to live with
Yeah.
that. Like you're gonna dwell on that constantly. And if you're not thinking about how I can do better, how I can be better, or how I can maintain that standard for yourself, if anyone, just yourself, like then you can't maintain it for anyone else. And you'll
Yeah.
always be judged by your work ethic and what you put out into the world as like a creator. And it goes from my music, my art, anything. Graffiti is another perfect example of that. You can't just be going around claiming to be the best graffiti writer in the game and then just fucking painting sloppy toy garbage all the time. It's like graffiti is a perfect example because once you stick to a tag, that tag is directly related to you. And if you're not constantly progressing, pushing the envelope, you're essentially regressing. And
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
the industry kind of moves forward, you got to stay up with it. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my biggest focus is just having my standards be
Well,
uncompromising.
you understand reputation, and listen, my friend, you've built quite the legacy and continue to. I couldn't have asked for a better guest to really understand what building a legacy, going through those trials and tribulations, and continuing on the legal side. I get it. We've cut our teeth on the other side. I get it, and there's still operators, incredible people that are still there that do not want to shift. So be it. Can't blame them
Yeah,
one bit after what we've seen in this industry. But
for
listen,
sure.
it's been awesome chopping it up, man. I know that you've got more extraction to do. There's always
Of
something to
course.
extract. There's always products to develop. But I really appreciate you joining me on Legacies. The audience is going to love this. Thank you so
Excellent.
much. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it.
No worries. I just want to say a big shout out and thank you to everyone that I've ever interacted with in this industry that's ever been a part of my progression. I want to shout out the whole Ad Astra team, definitely the whole Leaf Infusions team. Keep an eye out for High Key, Biggies, of course. And yeah, man, big things coming in the future. I'm hoping to release my own kind of signature by Creed Taylor line.
Nice.
Maybe fourth quarter this year, first quarter next year. So I still have a couple cards up my sleeve and some new, potentially breaking extraction formats that I want to release. And yeah, man,
Nice.
super
Well, we're
excited.
looking forward to that. We can see something with Creed Taylor on. It'll fly off the shelves, that's for sure. But thanks, man. Appreciate you.
So yeah, thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate the time.